Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Wednesday morning, October the 2nd. I thought we'd focus in on the tropics over the next several minutes here. First, we'll take a look across the Pacific Ocean, and then we'll focus in on the Atlantic. I do believe there will be a named tropical storm, at least a named tropical storm, maybe even a minimal hurricane over the Gulf of Mexico sometime over the weekend or the early part of next week. There's still a lot of questions to be answered about that particular system, but we'll kind of talk about that, focus in on that over the next several minutes. There is a hurricane over the far eastern Atlantic, very well could become a major hurricane. However, it looks like it'll stay out over the open waters of the Atlantic as it starts to turn to the north and then ultimately to the north and east. Again, should remain out over the open waters of the Atlantic, Hurricane Kirk. This is a look at the Hawaiian Islands right here, and no tropical activity whatsoever. Certainly somewhat unusual for this time of the year. We are past the climatological peak. Nonetheless, you would normally see some kind of a system out here in the early part of October. Let's now shift to the eastern part of the Pacific Ocean, and indeed there is a system here that very likely will become a named tropical system to the south and west of Mexico right here, and that would continue to move in a west-northwest direction over the next several days. Now, let's focus in on the Atlantic Ocean. And there is no system right now over the Gulf of Mexico. However, I do believe there will be a system, and NOAA's National Hurricane Center has also suggested such a given an indication of their belief that something will develop in the Gulf of Mexico. The conditions are ripe for some sort of a storm, maybe a named tropical storm, maybe even a minimal hurricane in this area, let's say over the next 5 to 7 days or so. This is the Hurricane Kirk that I alluded to up front in this video. Looks like it'll move pretty much in this direction here and could very well become a major hurricane somewhere along the track, maybe in this area here, before it starts to move out over some cooler waters of the North Atlantic. But again, this is the area of focus over the next several days. We'll go through a few different computer forecast models, and of course I'll give you what I believe will happen over in the Gulf of Mexico. Well, let's walk through a few different computer forecast models with a focus on the Gulf of Mexico. This is the 0Z version of the GFS model, the conventional version of the GFS model. Then we'll take a look at the artificial intelligence version of the European model, and finally we'll wrap up with the Canadian model on all from 0Z last night, again with a focus right here on the Gulf of Mexico. Again, not much going on right now. There is no named tropical system right now in the Gulf of Mexico, but let's just move forward here, and by the upcoming weekend we'll certainly start to see some signs here. Here we go. You see a lot of green here. That's just some light rain, not anything too significant. By the end of the work week here, we're now in the Friday night forecast map time frame here. Then we go into the upcoming week and you start to see a little bit of a closed off isobar, certainly not a powerful storm by any means at this particular time. This is now late Saturday night time frame. Then the GFS starts to show some more significant rain, and I think that is something that I would suggest. My expectation here is that if indeed there is some heavy rain associated with the system, it will likely stay over Florida and not be a problem for that area that was very hard hit by Hurricane Helene, not reaching up into the southern Appalachians. So that's the first thing I would point out here is it looks like any significant rain, any potential significant rain with this next system, liable to stay over Florida. Not good for Florida necessarily, but the good news is that it should not go as far north as the southern Appalachians. That's the last thing they need is more significant rain. We'll go a little bit farther in time here, kind of a couple different areas of low pressure. Little isobars closed off here over the eastern Gulf by next Monday, and one over the southwestern Gulf. When you see kind of a split in the tropical systems, that tends to mean they'll be weak. not one strong concentric kind of a low. So here we are all the way into the early part of next week, and GFS keeps that area of rain over the Florida Peninsula, and here we go all the way into next Tuesday, and finally we get kind of a closed off low pressure area by the early Tuesday of next week. So two things look likely. Uh, like that there's any significant rainfall, any potential significant rainfall with this system will stay over Florida, not move into the southern Appalachians, and very unlikely that this next system becomes anything nearly as strong as Hurricane Helene. Now let's walk through the artificial version, the artificial intelligence version of the European model. And I've been tracking this, as have many meteorologists, just to see how this may do compared to conventional models, and it's done fairly well, I would say, with respect to tropical storm formation in the Atlantic Basin. We're moving forward here. You can see some green here, some rain showing up over the Gulf of Mexico, and then by the early part of the upcoming weekend, this particular model run, again from 0Z last night, develops a system a little farther to the south and west as compared with the GFS out here over the southwestern Gulf of Mexico, and that slowly meanders into the eastern Gulf of Mexico by the time we get to early next week. Certainly a little bit of a stronger system than the GFS, and this is certainly a scenario on the table here, again with the in potential heavy rain likely limited to the Florida Peninsula here, not going up into western North Carolina, for example, or eastern part of Tennessee. It tends to meander over the Gulf of Mexico. In this particular model run, it moves the system across the Florida Peninsula, not nearly as strong as Hurricane Helene, and then out over the open waters of the southwestern Atlantic by next Tuesday. Now let's wrap up with the Canadian model run. Now this particular model run has a more significant storm system. Probably I would consider this an outlier. Certainly the other two were not nearly as strong as what this will show in a moment here, will develop by the early part of next week. We're moving forward here into the upcoming weekend. Again, this is the Canadian model run from 0Z last night. And here we go. It's starting to produce some rainfall over the Gulf of Mexico by the middle of the upcoming weekend. And similar to the artificial version of the European model, it has a low pressure area in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. Very warm waters this time of the year, certainly capable of producing not only a tropical storm, but minimal hurricane or more, warm enough for that this time of the year. Then this slowly meanders off to the north and east and ends up with a significant storm system compared to those other model runs. Again, I would say this is kind of an outlier. This is late Tuesday night time frame. We go into the middle part of next week. Indeed, this particular model run has a hurricane closing in on the west coast of Florida by the middle of next week. This is a week out from right now. So do not want to discount this by any means, and this is something we'll monitor closely over the next several days. I think the bottom line here is can expect a system to develop over the Gulf of Mexico over the next 5 to 7 days or so, likely meanders over the Gulf of Mexico and has an impact ultimately on the Florida Peninsula. Unlikely to see it go into the southern Appalachians, as an example. Unlikely to see it go that far to the north, but its magnitude certainly still in question. I tend to not go this deep with this particular low, but I will not completely rule that out by any means. We're still 5 to 7 days away or so, but again, this is the area to look over the next several days. The Gulf of Mexico, where a lot of the action this tropical season has been, both the Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico. Again, Hurricane Kirk very well could become a major hurricane over the next few days, but likely, very likely, stays out over the open waters of the tropical Atlantic. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.